Merry Christmas, everyone. This is the Paranormal Guys. We are on break right now, so this is a recorded episode, but we wanted to make sure that you got your paranormal in for Christmas. So Merry Christmas. We will see you after the new year. So let's see who I have hiding backstage here. I have my wonderful and beautiful co-host, Miss Cheyenne. How are you?
I am fabulous. How are you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Of course you are. So you're working too much. We have a well, duty calls. We have a scheduled guest, Tim tonight, Tim Rayborn. He has written a Christmas horror book. Now this is right up your alley, Cheyenne. Let's bring him out and let him start telling us. Yeah, I know. You're into the Christmas horror. You're into the horror, period. Hey, Tim, how are you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Nice to see you both.
You too. You're
fabulous to have you.
Yeah, we're glad you could take time out of your busy schedule for us.
Oh, no, it's fine. I'm glad we were able to nail down a date. Finally, it was a little bit iffy there for a bit. So
yeah. We went back and forth. So yeah, it is what it is. It's the holiday season. Everybody's got something going on. So.
Exactly, it happens.
Yeah, hopefully Santa will be good to me. I'll find out later today. So.
Is that a case of fingers crossed or don't hold your breath? You know,
don't hold your breath.
Depends what my wife told Santa.
Oh, you're in trouble then. You're in real trouble then.
More than likely.
He'll be lucky if he gets a lone pair of underwear and a set of socks.
I'll get a sweater and a lump on the head is what I'll get.
That's Krampus. You get a swat on the back, you know.
You'll get you. Hey, you might end up getting your own little snow globe.
Aw. As long as you don't send me any crystals, I'll be happy.
No. Next year I will make sure that it is at least double the size bigger.
Okay. All right. Well, we're not going to talk about that on Christmas.
You guys carry on. I'm fine.
After I hit stop recording, I'll show you. It was my birthday present. I'll show it.
Oh, okay.
We're not going to do it.
He loved it.
So Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about your book.
Oh dear. Oh boy. Talk about myself. I'm a writer, professional writer. I've been for many years, also a professional musician, though. These days, I mostly just focus on writing. I write books for a living, actually. It's what I do. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. Some of my own. Sometimes I'm hired by publishers to write books. And the one we're going to talk about today is actually something I was hired to write because I'd already written a number of books for them about paranormal topics and other things. So when they proposed this series, my name came up as the person most likely to want to do it. So and of course, I jumped at the chance. It was great. So yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about that today. I've got many years of writing experience, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. I guess I have a website if anybody's interested in this book or my other books. More than happy to direct them to where they can buy them. Available in a lot of stores. Most stores carry them. So yeah, I'd be delighted to talk about this and a little bit more. So yeah, happy to be here. And the book that we're going to talk about a little bit today is The Scary Book of Christmas Lore, which is a collection of tales. It's a collection of stories or surveys, if you will, about all sorts of terrifying Christmas monsters, mainly in Europe, a few other places as well. Winter and winter month sort of creatures that haunted the minds of Europeans from anywhere from Iceland all the way to Turkey. So we can kind of delve deeply into those and talk a little bit about why winter, why over the holidays, why are these creatures, in the backgrounds of our subconscious at that time and what that might mean, and what are some of them and what horrible things do they do. So happy to talk about all of that today.
And Europe always has the best ones during the holidays too. We need to get more creative over here.
Yes. Yeah, there's a long tradition of them. Japan has some really cool stuff too, particularly with like ghost stories and things. I'll talk a little bit about those. Yeah, I mean, as you know, Japanese ghost legends are pretty horrifying. If you've ever seen The Ring or The Grudge or those sorts of things, and they have some that are very winter. Obviously not Christmas, but from their own winter traditions as well. So, although Japan goes big in on the sort of commercial side of Christmas, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's quite funny actually. So they love it there. Yeah,
I think Coca-Cola is the biggest influence on ours. So.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when I was writing this book, I actually looked for if there were any like American Christmas folk legends about monsters, and particularly from things like New England. You'd think that maybe in Massachusetts or Connecticut or Vermont,
Yes.
there would be like horrible, Christmas
Can
werewolves.
we get a
or
Christmas witch?
There's
It's Massachusetts. Give us a Christmas witch.
Yeah, there's nothing. Curiously enough, in Massachusetts of all places, I didn't find a single scrap of American folklore to deal with like holiday and winter horrors. Now there must be some, but I didn't find it when I was doing this. And since I was kind of under a deadline to get it done, I just didn't have the time to look more. So I mostly focused on Europe and a little bit on Japan and a few other places in the world. It says the subtitle is around the world, but it really is mostly Europe. But yeah, it is curious that as rich as American folklore is, and as interesting as there are all these interesting stories about creatures and unexplained phenomena, none of them are specifically tied to winter here that I've been able to find. They probably do exist. I just haven't been able to locate them yet. I'm sure there's some folklorists listening to this that will call in or email you and say, well, here's 17 examples that he missed, but
Might be good for volume 2. So.
Well, there are others coming in the series, and I'll talk about that later. So yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the most famous is Krampus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. People more and more are beginning to learn about Krampus and who Krampus is, and we can talk a little bit about that happily. So,
sure. Oh, I need to go to one of the Krampus festivals.
Oh yeah, they're super fun. They're really fun. So Krampus is a really interesting character who has its origins in Germanic, Austrian, Swiss sort of folklore. It's very much Alpine, sort of like northern Switzerland, the Austrian Alps, and where the Alps and Switzerland meet Germany, and particularly in the remote villages in there. Krampus, as you may or may not know, is the sort of goat-like sort of monster, demon, whatever, who haunts the winter months and is particularly associated with the Catholic saint, Saint Nicholas. And we'll talk a little bit more about him in a minute. But the two of them in the traditional Krampus parades and celebrations always go together. So somebody would always dress as the historical Saint Nicholas, and someone would always dress as Krampus as they went door to door in villages. Now, the historical Saint Nicholas, we associate Saint Nick with Santa Claus, obviously. It's one of the versions of Santa Claus. The historical Saint Nicholas was a real person, Nicholas of Cusa, I believe, who lived in what's now modern Turkey in the 3rd century. And Nicholas, excuse me, was known for being very generous, for gift giving, for helping out the poor. He became sort of a patron saint, if you will, of gift giving. And there's one connection with Santa, actually. It comes from that. And there are all sorts of stories about Nicholas and his gift giving. But there's one particular story anyway, which is the first story in this book, actually, that's rather gruesome and horrible. And of course, I had to include it. It's a story about these 3 boys, who are out playing, doing something, and they realize that they've been wandering too long and it's getting dark. So they're not going to be able to make it home before dark. So they go to the nearest village and they're looking for a place where they can sleep for the night. And they come upon the residence of an old butcher. And they knock on his door and they ask him if he can put them up for the night, and then in the following morning, they'll be able to go home to their own town, their own village. Well, the butcher says, sure, come on in. But this is the sort of Sweeney Todd type butcher. He already has something horrible in mind. So he murders them. He chops them up into little pieces, and he puts all the pieces into a big barrel filled with brine to cure so that he can sell it as meat later on, as sausages and whatever. And so for 7 years, the boys' dead bodies are curing in this meat while the evil butcher is waiting to serve them up. So St. Nicholas hears about this and comes to visit the butcher and confronts him about it. And then he says some prayers and makes signs and whatever. And the 3 boys are miraculously stitched back together and brought back to life and emerge from the brine. And after that, they go away. And the butcher, we don't know what quite happens to the butcher. The story is not historical from Nicholas's time. It's from much later. It's from the 11th or 12th century. So really almost 1,000 years after Nicholas lived. But one of the pieces of legend is that the butcher was condemned to become the sort of goat-headed demon that would travel with Nicholas throughout all eternity. And it's a tenuous link. We don't actually know if that's recent or if that was an older legend, but some people like to associate Krampus with this cannibalistic butcher that was going to sell children parts as sausages, basically. So Krampus's role in Germanic folklore is that he's sort of the anti-Santa. If children have been good, they get fruits and nuts and sweets and candies and little toys. If they've been bad, Krampus snatches them up with a big birch stick and gives them a big whack on the butt or on the head, throws them in the sack and drags them off. And if they've been really bad, they may never come back. So he serves as the kind of the lump of coal, but the sort of death metal version of the lump of coal, if you will. It's if you get thrown in Krampus's sack or his cage, you're not coming back. So this was a popular folkloric element of the holiday celebrations in Germany and Switzerland and Austria, parts of northern Italy for many, many centuries. That the story of the demon Krampus that travels with St. Nicholas, and St. Nicholas's Day is December 6th, so it's actually still celebrated. That's the Roman Catholic feast day. So the night before is known as Krampusnacht, which is Krampus's night. So that's the night that all the little boys and girls, if you have not been good, Krampus will come and snatch you up. But if you have been good, Nicholas will reward you the next day. So they celebrate that on the 5th and 6th rather than on Christmas Day. But it's still very much a part of that whole calendar of events that happens throughout the winter months. So
we need to bring that back.
Yeah, I agree. I think not just kids. I think of a lot of adults that need a good thrashing with birch sticks, to be perfectly honest. So yeah. Throw them in
got a list.
Well,
we need a list.
you gotta be good. You'll get your fruit and nuts from Santa. If you're not,
so it's interesting
can't tell you what's gonna happen.
No, not at all. There's a whole bunch of variations on Krampus and other characters throughout all of these sort of cultures and things that are similar sorts of things. They're often vengeful creatures of the night that come and punish the evil doers, so it's particularly children. And so that's like a through line theme running through most of these things. And it's interesting to talk about because we tend to think of the holidays as, in our modern world, they can be very stressful for people, but at least in theory, the holidays are a time of friends and family and feasting and having good food and good drinks and celebration and singing carols and giving gifts. And it's generally considered a happy time. Obviously, for many people, it's not. Many people, it's very stressful or sad or depressing. But the commercial thing that we push is that it's very happy and it's a time for gathering and all of these things. And yet the through line of all of these stories is that they're very dark. They're Grimm's fairy tale level dark. And yet they are intimately associated with the winter months, some with Christian ideas, some with pagan ideas. But it's interesting that, so we wonder, why do these things sit together? So why is there such a strong streak of horror going through the time that's supposed to be one of the most wonderful time of the year? And there's a lot of interesting theories about it. But the thing I think is that we forget in our modern world, and not everybody has these luxuries, but if we're fortunate enough to have a home that's heated and has electricity and is comfortable and we have food, and if we're short on food, we can just go down to the local store and buy it, and we have a roof over our head. If you're thinking about previous centuries, particularly in impoverished small towns and villages, those were not guarantees after November. And a lot of people looked at that time as a very, very daunting time. Between November and even early March, it could snow, it could ice, it could be freezing. And you only have a limited amount of food that's going to last for the winter. You only have a limited amount of shelter or firewood. You might not be able to make it. So there was no guarantee, particularly if you were very young or very old, that you were going to even make it to February or March. So it is a kind of liminal time between life and death. It's when the darkness in Northern Europe is dominant, when the dark is very much a part of your life, when particularly if you get into Scandinavia, you may only have 4, 5, 6 hours of daylight before it turns dark again. So it's a time to allow the imagination to run wild, but it's also being outside is death. If you get lost in a snowdrift in a forest, you're gone. That's it. So a lot of the Grimm's fairy tales, as we look at them, are warnings for children to be careful about going into the forest, about trusting strangers. This, I think, is an extension of that. Do not go off. Do not stray from the path. If you have to go into the forest, go with someone, because if you get caught out, you're dead. And there's no, we don't have to sugarcoat that. That's it.
And it wasn't a time to, you got to be good for your presents and everything. It's just, no, keep your crap in line, or.
And there was
no sparing of the children's feelings. It was just scare them straight.
And also everybody had to pull their weight. This is the thing, even kids, like there was work to be done to prepare the animals, to prepare the farms, to get enough firewood, to make sure you had smoked meat and your grain was all in. So a child didn't have the luxury of sort of goofing off and being disobedient or running off and playing all day, particularly as these months came along. So if you didn't pull your weight, you were letting everybody down, and that could actually potentially have terrible ramifications for the whole community. So there was a sense of like social responsibility, community responsibility, and it's kind of like, as I said, there's these creatures often, when we talk about them, and we'll talk about a few in a minute, live at the edges of society. They're not part of the community. They're the other. They're the separate, and it's very much what we kind of talk about with modern, cryptozoology and things. These creatures operate outside of our aliens. They operate outside of there's our world and there's their world, and there's our world that's the village, and the evil ogre or the evil witch lives in the forest, and you don't go into that forest because that's their space. This is our space. It's kind of like the M. Night Shyamalan film, The Village. It has that same sort of, This is our space. Think of it that way. I mean, obviously there was a twist to that, but it's the same idea. The monsters live there. We live there here. We don't cross their boundary. They don't cross ours. So there's this kind of the sense of that. So these night terrors live out there. They may be considered, symbols or myths. They are representations of the actual dangers of nature, whether that's getting lost in the snow or getting hunted by an angry and hungry wolf or a wildcat or something. These things represent the dark parts of the psyche, but there's still this very much a sense of otherness. We are ourselves and they are over there, and we leave them alone and they leave us alone. So don't goof off, don't cause them any problems, or they will come and get you if you violate that truce really between us. And this was never more apparent than in the winter months, when there was so much darkness and so much cold, and nature was really waiting to kill you at any moment, and you could die at any moment from disease or from starvation or from freezing to death. These were very real very real, things that happened. So it's not really surprising that if you look at a continent that has pretty intense winters, that the northern part of the continent is going to have these collections of sort of monster legends and things associated with the darkest time of the year. And over time, some of them got wrapped up into Christmas as well. And it became the sort of thing, well, be good or this thing will come and get to you, so it sort of develops that way. And I think they kind of develop side by side over the centuries. So that's where we start getting this rich lore of different holiday and winter monsters, and they're very different. Some of them are different from place to place, and even you might have a Krampus legend in one village in Austria, and 30 miles away in Switzerland they might have a completely different version, but the same idea is there, but they develop according to the local color. So there's a lot of old pageants about these creatures. There's parades, there's celebrations and such, and they're starting to take off now in America and other places, and people have turned them into these big elaborate things. And some people are a little upset with that. They feel that it's taken some of the spirit away from what they were originally meant to attend, and turned them into these big commercial things with these elaborate Krampus costumes and noise and music and whatever. And it's an interesting way of looking at how folklore morphs and changes in different cultures and such. And this has sort of been taken over by cultures where it didn't start and changed into something that's not really what they were intended for. I find that, as someone who's interested in folklore, really fascinating, just to see how different cultures adopt these practices. So that's a little bit of a background on the idea of holiday and winter and Christmas monsters in general and what they might represent. So yeah.
Did the Vikings, were they a part of that, or did they have something separate? Do you know?
Well, it's one of my specialties is actually Norse history. They have their own stories. They have some of their own legends. They're more recent than the Viking Age, than the Norse Age in general, most of them. And I'm going to talk about one in particular in a few minutes. There's a great one that we'll talk about. So there isn't a direct connection to these, but undoubtedly there is an underlying sense that some of the folklore and spiritual things absolutely do carry through from there, because there are common links between sort of Germanic pagan spirituality and Old Norse, the Old Norse gods and such. They absolutely have some of the same DNA, certainly. So yeah, the answer to your question is kind of sort of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just learning a little bit of the Norse, and so I'm actually have you on for a show about Norse.
Oh, well, just as a quick thing, I do have a new book out also called Northern Mythology, which is a comprehensive guide to the entire Nordic world, including Finnish and Sami beliefs as well. So I'd love to talk about that. If you would like to talk about that at some point, I'd be happy to.
Absolutely. That may already be in my Kindle cart.
Oh, okay, good.
I think it may be, actually. So
excellent. Well, I can highly recommend it.
It comes from a good person.
Pretty good. So
yeah, I understand. A friend of mine went to, I want to say it was the Netherlands for Christmas, and he was just like taken back. He's like, oh, what is this?
Yeah,
it's totally different, because they had a parade, and then their version of I guess it was Krampus, is a whole lot different than
It's different.
others.
They have a character called Frau Perchta, which is Black Pete, and it's a similar kind of
That's
thing.
correct.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
correct.
yeah. Yeah, and there's some concern about that because originally I think the character was meant to imply that there was a kind of like the black on his face came from coal or soot or whatever from being in chimneys, but it also kind of devolved into something kind of racist, and for a while it was done with like blackface and such. So there's been some controversies about that in recent decades. Is like, is this the actual cultural original thing, or was this something with a 19th century racist overlay? But so it's kind of a controversial thing. I know the Dutch version, but there are many versions of this type of character that exists throughout Europe.
And it's funny learning about that. I found out about that from The Office.
Yeah, yeah.
Along with Belschnickel.
Yes, that's a wonderful one. Yeah, who's in my book as well. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the other monsters. One of my favorite. Let me see if I can find it. This book, as I said, this book that I wrote has some absolutely splendid illustrations. It's a Scottish illustrator named Neil Adams, and he just brought these things to absolutely horrific life. One of my favorites is Frau Perchta, who's known in Austria and Bavaria, and you can see her absolutely horrible visage here with the big scythe. Yeah.
Oh my.
So Frau Perchta is another knight, a kind of witch, a demon, whatever you want to call her, used to scare children, and it was the same kind of thing. Children were expected to do their duty, do their work, and all of that. And one of the things that they were said to do is sometimes you're supposed to leave porridge or other things out for the night spirits to visit. And this is kind of where we get our milk and cookies for Santa sort of thing. And one of the things here, though, is that Perchta will go from village to village and house to house and inspect to make sure that children have done all of the household chores. That's her main thing, really. It's not so much if they've been good, but have they done their nighttime chores? If they have, she passes over, and especially if they leave something for her, that's even better. If they have not, she takes her big scythe, which you saw in there, slits open their bellies, pulls out their entrails, I don't know if she eats them or puts them somewhere, takes a load of straw and rocks, stuffs it into their bellies, and kind of sews them back up. So when the parents come in the morning, the child is dead and their belly is stuffed with straw. So happy holidays. It's pretty horrible. That's like something out of one of those, like horrible, schlocky, R-rated horror films or something. There's like a total horror film waiting to be made with that. So that's one example. She's kind of Krampus adjacent, probably a much older Germanic spirit, possibly even one of the old Germanic goddesses at one point that kind of morphed into an evil spirit over time during Christianization, was demonized and turned into this horrible creature. But this is the kind of things which haunts children's imaginations, particularly in previous centuries. So she's a very good example of that. There's a bunch of others. You were talking about Vikings and the Norse. There's a terrific one from Iceland called Jólinkattr, the Yule Cat, and I love the Yule Cat. Yule Cat is an institution in Iceland, in Reykjavik, in the city of Reykjavik. They have a gigantic lit up Yule Cat that you can pose with for pictures. They leave it up during the whole holiday season. The Yule Cat is a gigantic sort of cat. Could look like a house cat, could look like a wild cat. Nobody knows. And one of the things about Yule Cat is it's a similar kind of thing to these others. What it was is that children who had been good, had done all of their farm work and all these, because historical Iceland was mostly farms and farmsteads. There were no real towns there. It was mostly just collections of farms and very small villages. And so there was a lot of work to be done to prepare for the very, very brutal winters that happened in Iceland. And one of the stories was that children who did all of their farm work, who did all of their housework and such, would be rewarded with new clothes on Christmas. Now, if you're a child, getting clothes on Christmas is probably the worst thing you can imagine. You get your aunt's sweater or the socks. It's like the worst thing in the world. But in those days, getting new clothes was a pretty big deal. If there were a way of keeping warm and somebody took the trouble to make these things for you, that was a big deal. So children were rewarded with brand new clothes, warm clothes, colorful, bright clothes. It was considered a real honor, and it was great. However, if you were not good, then you didn't get those clothes, or maybe you just got your old ones repaired. Now, the Yule Cat on Christmas Eve, I believe, or maybe it was Christmas night, is a gigantic sort of 8-10 foot tall creature that roams the wilds of Iceland. And on those nights, he walks from village to village, from house to house, from farm to farm, peering in the window to see if the children are wearing their new clothes that they've gotten for being good, or if they have not, and they're just wearing scraps or anything. Now, if they're wearing clothes, he'll pass over that and move to the next one. If they're not wearing clothes, he will break into the house, take whatever food they were eating for their Christmas dinner and eat that so that they're left that. He will then abduct them and drag them out into the snow, kill them and eat them. So that's the second course. So
I was
it's
thinking cat, okay, you got your new clothes, you're not appreciating your new clothes. Cat comes in, shreds your clothes.
yeah, no, if you have the new clothes, you're safe. If you don't have new clothes, then you're in trouble. So yeah, you run the real risk of being devoured by the Yule Cat. Now, we don't know how old this legend is. The earliest written sources of it are only from like the early 19th century, but it probably is something considerably older than that. These kinds of things tend to not evolve in vacuums, and it probably had a lot of influence from the continent. But yeah, I love that one. So Yule Cat is a big deal in Iceland. And they have, as I said, they have this giant Yule Cat made out of lights that's about 8-10 feet tall in Reykjavik in the square, and people pose for pictures with it. And it's kind of it's like their national, one of their national holiday symbols. But it's interesting that it comes from such a dark place that they use this, and they have, you walk down those streets and there's all these Christmas trees and Christmas lights, and then right in the middle of the thing, there's a Yule Cat. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of kind of holiday and horror that exists in the modern world. And I love that.
Well, I mean, it just comes right back to, Grimm's fairy tales, how horrific, the actual story of like Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella was. And then
absolutely the stepsisters cut off their toes so that they could try to fit into the slipper, because and there's all sorts of the original Snow White, isn't it, that the mother has to put on these red hot shoes and dances herself to death or something. There's all sorts of terrible
there's some crazy ones, but it, like, even with like you were saying with Santa, just how sugar coated everything becomes.
Yeah.
And we need to bring back scaring the kids around the holidays.
I like it because it does actually is a reminder of that sort of fragility of life and that sort of thing. We've kind of lost that. We're out of touch with that. We're a little, in some ways, we're a little
hey, look what you have. Look what these people didn't have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Appreciate that new pair of socks.
Yeah.
Or the cat's coming for you.
Yeah. Yeah, the fragility of life is something that kind of people have become a little disconnected from. And I think that's what these stories actually speak to, and what they're talking about is that being mindful of that, and how the community depends upon everybody and nobody gets a pass and nobody can get away from that. And we are one group of people, and we have to look out for each other, and the outside world is potentially quite dangerous. So we have to be careful about that. So yeah, there's a through line through most of these stories, that whether it's Iceland, whether it's Sweden, whether it's Austria or Greece or Turkey, they all have similar kinds of themes to them. And it kind of comes from they kind of bubble up from, I think, from the same kind of unconscious sort of concepts of belonging and not belonging, and fear of the unknown, and fear of one's place in the natural world. And it's really interesting to see how each of these different regions develops their own versions of these kinds of stories. And it is very much, for Northern Europe, it's very much winter centric, because you don't really hear a whole lot about summer solstice monsters, because the sun's up for 17 to 20 hours a day, and it's often warm and bright, and so it's not really a place that monsters are going to live in that sense. So it really is very much a seasonal thing. It's a product of the Northern Hemisphere, and being in those specific regions, it can be very dark and very cold for a lot of months. And so I think that's what we're looking at. It predates Christmas by far, absolutely, but some of these things have been sort of roped into Christmas as well, in the various solstice or Christmas celebrations, New Year's, all of those things can have these kinds of stories wrapped around them. Definitely, when these cultures adopted Christianity, they did not really get rid of a lot of their old beliefs. They just currently sit by side. They sat side by side, really. And they're an example of cultural blending, and how you can't really eradicate those kinds of deep beliefs, because they exist on a sort of mythic, unconscious level, and they're a part of like human psyche and a part of the human belief systems and such. So they survived and even thrived under new beliefs and new things. So it's really interesting to see. It's interesting. One of the things in Austria and in Germany, the Nazis banned Krampus celebrations during their tenure there, and as soon as they were done, they came right back. So it's interesting. They thought they were really subversive, and it was not conducive to order and whatever. So all Krampus celebrations were banned. But then in the aftermath, in the later 1940s, they started making a comeback, and now Krampus is a huge thing, both there and in the United States. So it's really fascinating. You can't really suppress these things. Yeah.
Well, and once you start, once the horror people start finding out more stuff like that, then it starts. They're like, yes, we need it.
Well, there is a great, you've probably seen it, the Krampus film. It came out a few years ago. It's actually good fun. And it actually tells the story fairly well. It's its own thing, and it makes up a lot of stuff. But I think it captures the spirit of it quite well with the horrendous.
It was a great combination of comedy and horror.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like those. It has that kind of fall back to like these classics from the 1980s. There's one that I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to watch it maybe even this weekend. It's called There's Something in the Barn. And it's it's in Norway, and it's about a family, an American family that inherits a farm in Norway, and they learn the Norwegian spirit called a nisse, which is popular in Norwegian folklore, lives in the barn. And they look like little bearded guys that are about, so tall, about a foot tall or whatever. And according to Norwegian
like a gnome.
Yeah, kind of a gnome or a little dwarf kind of thing. And the folklore is that you're supposed to leave out porridge for them with honey and maybe cream or butter in it, and it keeps them happy. But if you start doing certain things, they will absolutely wreak havoc on your house and cause problems. And so this is a story about a bunch of clueless Americans that move there, don't actually honor the nisse that's there, and then it turns their life. It's kind of like Gremlins, basically. It becomes sort of like a kind of disaster film about this little creature sort of basically making their lives absolute hell. It's a kind of horror comedy, and I haven't seen it. I'm going to watch it hopefully this weekend. But it's an example of like ancient folkloric beliefs finding their way into modern popular culture and becoming, popular movies.
And what's interesting with that is because I haven't heard of that before, but in reading like the Harry Potter books, there are creatures in Harry Potter in the books, not in the movies,
right?
That are very similar.
Yeah.
So you can start seeing where people are pulling stuff from.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a pretty common theme throughout Celtic and northern Scandinavian mythology that these small creatures, whether they're fairies, whether they're gnomes, whatever, often inhabit houses. And as long as you treat them well and with respect, they will help. They will even do household chores and whatever. But if you start disrespecting them or whatever, the best case scenario is they'll just leave. Worst case scenarios, they will make your life absolute hell. So this is a through line that you find in a lot of Northern European mythology. So it's only natural that at some point people would start making movies or shows about this sort of thing as well. So yeah, it's a fascinating way to see how ancient folklore finds its way into modern contemporary entertainment, really.
And I love all the crazy stuff like that came out of Germany at the time. Not even just with Krampus, but again with stuff that I found out from watching The Office of just how much stuff. How many like German stories and things that there were of just to scare your kids into like they had mentioned if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Strollpeter.
Yeah.
Who would cut kids' thumbs off if they sucked their thumbs.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good one. Sure.
He would take his big sharp scissors out and cut little kids' thumbs off for sucking their thumbs.
I think there's a Grimm's fairy tale about that as well, actually. So it's a very deep. I was gonna say deep cut, no pun intended, but pun intended.
Ching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of those stories are filled with violence and blood and death and mutilation and all sorts of horrible things. But that was, and again, I think it's people. If we're looking at the time that these things came up, and we don't know how old some of these stories are. Some of them may date back to the Middle Ages. Some of them might be 16th, 17th, 18th century. But people in general, as I was saying, lived closer to nature then. And so they saw the cycle of life and death much, much more than we do. And they had their own farm animals, and the kids would be there when they slaughtered their animals. They would slice their throat and blood would be everywhere.
They would be the ones doing it too.
You didn't have the luxury of being squeamish if you were going to survive, and that's what it is. So you had to slit open that pig from throat to belly, take its intestines out. You had to gut the fish and pull its innards out. People didn't have a lot of patience for squeamishness. So it's not completely surprising that these kid stories can be very violent and bloody because that was a part of life. Basically.
You had to suck it up.
basically, yeah, and that's it. So yeah, we kind of, again, it's the thing that we forget. We're kind of divorced from that in the modern world. But I think one of the reasons these things are so violent is not for the sake of like shock and gore and whatever, but it was just a normal part of life. And people died of horrible accidents all the time. People chopping wood chopped their thumb off, or they got the mist and got a big gash in their leg, and then it got infected and they died of gangrene. You know, there was no antibiotics, there was no modern medical treatments. So
Well, there was very much that you didn't. Oh, we have to cater to the children. It was no we're all on the same level here. If you can't,
yes, they were working members of the family.
Children were
Age,
basically treated as miniature adults and expected to behave accordingly. After about, certainly in the Middle Ages, it was up till about age 6 or 7, kids could kind of be kids. And then after that, it was like, all right, you know, that was often the age 7 or 8 was often the age when boys in upper class families were sent away to be like pages for knights or to be in service to somebody else and before they came back. So your childhood ended at about the age of 8, basically, if you know, and then you had to do things. So that was the way it went. So yeah, the kind of Victorian concept of the innocence of childhood is very much that sort of 19th century and on, and very much an upper class kind of thing. And it's something that we now hold to, but it wasn't really a part of most thinking, up until that point. So yeah, so the stories could be very violent and bloody because you were expected to be a part of that world.
That's how it was.
Yeah.
Real life.
Yeah.
There was no sugarcoating anything. It was just this has been my quote for 2024. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
Yeah. F around and find out, basically. Yep. So
yeah. Yep.
How did we make the jump from this to the Grinch, who is, I mean, he's a bad guy, but he's not that bad.
That's an interesting story. I don't honestly know. Dr. Seuss, obviously, Theodore Guyz, who's German or Swiss or something, interestingly enough. So that's why a lot of his stories are a little demented and weird. There's that tradition kind of coming. Yeah, I do see him as kind of a modern fabulist, a modern folklorist. You know, there's things. So yeah, some of his stories are really weird and dark, and that's part of the appeal of them. Actually, they're a little. Cat in the Hat is fun, but he's a little sinister, and the Grinch is horrible, and you know, there's a whole bunch of those sorts of things there. So yeah, it could just be from the culture that he grew up with. He might have grown up with the original Grimm's fairy tales. And you think of like Hans Christian Andersen, of course, is another one. His fairy tales are full of blood and gore. The Red Shoes, the original version of The Little Mermaid, is terrible. The Snow Queen, they're all awful. So, and he was Danish. He lived in Odense, which is on the main peninsula of Denmark. So yeah. So there's this through line of traditions even into the 19th and 20th century of like, you know, somewhat sinister and gruesome tales for kids. I mean, you could even look at it like what's his name, who did the Addams Family, Charles Addams, you know, who did the amazing things, and they're slightly ghoulish and weird and they're fun, you know, and it's a similar idea. It's there's like this slightly sinister sort of handling of that. And these are Roald Dahl is another one, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. All those they're definitely on the dark and creepy side, you know, and yet they're children's classics. So yeah, so there's a long-standing tradition of this kind of stuff. You know, we think of like sanitized versions of things in Disney and whatever, but yeah, there's a lot of creepy, weird stuff in children's literature.
Yeah, because it started here, and the amount of filter that it went through to get here. So
yeah. So you know, that's part of it, is that we have a long tradition of this sort of stuff that continues in some ways. So it's not at all surprising that like our sort of time of year that we often associate with happiness and gift giving and children is also sort of plagued with these really dark stories as well. And that's it. It makes them really interesting. I think it's really fascinating. So yeah.
Well, I think it's like that with a lot of holidays. It's just not delved into as much, because if you look into, you know, it like Valentine's Day, Easter, what Easter was.
The sequel to Scary Book of Christmas Lore is just out, and I'm happy to come back and talk to it another time. It is the Scary Book of Valentine's Day Lore, which is all about horrible stories, not so much monsters, but stories of sort of like, you know, jealousy and betrayal and murder and all sorts of things from around the world. And there's a series that I'm now doing for them. And that was the second one they asked me to do. So yeah, Valentine himself has a whole history as a martyr and all that So yeah, happy to come back and talk about that in January or February if you'd like. But yeah, so that a lot of these celebratory things have these kind of sinister undertones, and I find it really fascinating. I think it's really, really interesting what we have, what we do find out about these when you start scratching the surface and sort of looking underneath and finding out what the psychology of these are. And I think it's also interesting because I do wonder personally, if we want to steer it a little bit more toward the paranormal for a few minutes, is like, when you look at these stories of Krampus, Frau Perchta, Belsnickel, all of these, the Christmas ogres and witches and demons and such, you wonder, did people really believe in any of these? Were they only there as scary stories for children? Were they Santa Claus type stories? Or did people actually create these legends based on unknown things that they saw in the forest? Did someone see something that they were, didn't know what was in an Austrian forest or in the Alps or something? And
I would guess it's a very 50-50 split of there were those people that were like, yeah, you don't see it out there. And then other that are like, nah, it's just to get the kids to do their chores. And
yes. Yeah, I think they grew up together. I think people saw things they couldn't explain. And, whether they were real or not, who knows? Who can say? There might have been some genuine cryptids, wandering around the Germanic forests and Nordic forests and stuff in centuries past that really freak people out. So it's entirely possible. Some of them are so vivid in their appearances and stuff that you have to wonder what actually inspired that. Was it just overactive imagination? Was it just fear? Did they really see something that they thought looked like this? Did they really see this thing? It's fascinating. So yeah. There's all sorts of legends about like night creatures and such. There's, going back to your Viking question, there's the legend, the Germanic phenomenon known as the wild hunt, which is supposed to be the souls of the dead that on certain nights of the year, particularly in the winter, it's hounds, it's humans, it's other nighttime creatures, said in some places to be led by the Norse god Odin, and that parade across the landscape. And you don't ever want to see them, because if you do see it, there's a chance that you'll be sucked into it and become a part of the wild hunt forever yourself. So it's a kind of ghost story that's set at the holiday time as well. So yeah, there's
I guess that would be don't go out past this time, and
exactly, and don't go
over there, because.
And Japan I was saying before, Japan has its own legends and has a lot of the through line in a lot of Japanese legends is ghost things, and it's very often, as you might know, vengeful female ghosts is like a real popular thing in Japanese lore. If you're looking at films like The Grudge and The Ring and such, and like these really horrific creatures. And it speaks to, I think, a lot of different things, in that I think a lot of, certainly in centuries past, women in Japan and other Asian countries were very, very constrained. It didn't have much in the way of rights. And I think that these stories often derive their ghosts of women who were wronged in life that come back to actually enact terrible vengeance on the living. And it's interesting that there is a very strong through line of that kind of vengeance in there, that if you're caught out at the wrong place at the wrong time, you're screwed, basically. One of my favorites is actually a story about a ghost called Yuki Onna, which various Japanese writers and such have claimed to have actually seen. So we're getting back to that paranormal thing. They've actually claimed Yuki Onna is often described as a beautiful Japanese woman wearing all white, but she's pretty much she's made up pretty much entirely of ice, and she can be harmless, but she can also be very dangerous. And often what happens is that if you're in the forest or you're walking on a pathway out in the woods somewhere, or anywhere that's in between civilizations, you might see her, and she might call out to you. And there's various legends about it. If you ignore her, you're safe, but others say if you don't ignore her, you're safe. And most often what happens is that she will try to embrace you, or she has a small child that tries to embrace you. And if you resist, they will tackle you and basically breathe on you and freeze you to death, or they will throw you off the side of a cliff so that you die or freeze in the snowdrifts. So there's this whole thing, and we don't really know. Again, the story about her, some say that she was a goddess that was stranded on Earth. There's other legends that say that she was murdered by someone and is still trying to seek vengeance for them. But she's not a Christmas spirit specifically, but I mentioned her in my book because she's very much a wintertime spirit and phantom that's seen mostly in January, in the equivalent of January. And various people have claimed to have actually seen her while out walking in the woods. So it's one of those on the edge of folklore meets paranormal. Like, we consider it part of folklore, but there are any number of people that have actually claimed to see this spirit or versions of her at various places around Japan in the winter months. So we're in that area between folklore and paranormal and real and not real, and just a campfire story versus something people actually saw, which I always find fascinating when you think, well, what is there an actual basis for this? Is there a historical or physical basis for this folkloric legend? Is there something out there that inspired this? And it seems that in this case, reports of her go back to the 15th century in Japan. So a long time, 500-600 years, people have been claiming to see this vengeful female ghost that can be very deadly and freeze you to death. And if you get away with your life, you're considered very lucky. So yeah.
What I find very interesting whenever it comes to like the paranormal with both Japanese and Chinese culture is they're very accepting. It's not like us that are like, oh, okay. And they're just like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's still very much.
Yeah, there's a ghost in the apartment down but we don't talk about it.
just let her be.
Well,
Yeah.
I had watched like a mini documentary. I believe it was when there was the tsunami in Japan, was it?
After the Fukushima earthquake?
Yes. And people were going around talking to different people who were just like, yeah, it would be 9 or 10 o'clock and we'd get a knock on the door and it would be someone asking if they were alive or dead, and we just had to assure them that they were dead, and they'd go on and they'd
Wow.
Or I'd be driving. I was a taxi driver, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and there was a lady in the back seat. All of a sudden, somehow, and they're so chill about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was just like,
well,
I mean, props to them for just being like, no, it's cool. You're dead. Just go ahead. Just go on.
I'll take your word. Where do you want to get out? Yeah, it's part of that is that Japanese culture still is deeply. It's a modern society. Of course, it's one of the most modern, quote unquote, societies on earth. But there's a deep within Japanese spiritual beliefs is a deeply rooted animistic religion called Shintoism, which believes that the entire world is populated with spirits all around, nature spirits of trees, rocks, place. So to them, even though a lot of people are modern and secular, they have this deep-rooted folkloric and spiritual tradition that the world is alive with spirits all the time. So even if they're kind of skeptical or secular in their daily lives, they're not going to be as freaked out about it because they've grown up in this, and it's in their entertainment, it's in their manga and anime, it's in all of these things. The idea of Shinto spirits everywhere. It's one of the world's largest animistic religions, and it's sort of blended with Buddhism when Buddhism was introduced to Japan. But it's interesting that so the fusion of those two things, I think, has left people still very open to that idea. So that even if they're living secular lives, even if they're atheist or whatever, they're still not completely closed off to the idea that there was a ghost sitting on the bus behind me the other day. No biggie. It's just So I think there's a psychology there that's already kind of attuned to that, and that may even make them more able to be open to see such things anyway. I think one has to be in the right mindset for these things as well. And I think if you have a whole society that is a little bit more attuned to that, even if it's not explicitly stated, it's going to be easier for people to actually see those things to begin with. Yeah.
I just remember watching that. It was, I forget, I think it was on like an episode of the newer Unsolved Mysteries
on Netflix.
Yeah. I think it was like the season 2 or something, or it might have been in that first season of the new. But I was just like, they're just walking around like it's nothing, and I'm like,
yeah, we're not as accepting of these things. I mean, even the Native Americans were even more accepting than we are. Our culture now is very, I don't know what the correct word would be, but sheltered. We're very close-minded.
It's a result of many centuries of sort of mechanistic thinking and certain ways of viewing the world and such, and Cartesian logic and such, all of which have their place and they're very important. But I think one of the reasons that stories like this, like Krampus and such, are making a comeback is people are still hungering for that kind of thing. There's an interesting, even though it's grotesque and sinister, it represents a kind of deep connection to something that I think we feel like we've lost in some sense. So that's why you're seeing like these things making a big comeback over the last 10, 20. Krampus has been popular for about 20 years now in America, but it's never completely gone out of style in Germany and Austria and other places. Yeah.
Well, and I would say there are probably a lot of people thinking the same thing of like, yeah, the kids need to be a little more scared.
Yeah, maybe.
Some commercialism out of it for sure. Well, Tim,
Absolutely.
what's your favorite one?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Which is your favorite?
Favorite? Oh, story?
The stories of the lore. Yeah, which one is?
I love the Yule Cat. I love the Yule Cat. There's some great things from Greece. The Kallikantzari, I think, are like these little satyr-like demons that will, kind of like gremlins, they will wreck people's houses. That's really fun. There's an interesting legend from Turkey, from northern Turkey, which has almost similar vibes to like Yeti and Bigfoot sort of stories, like the big hairy man of the mountains kind of thing in the mountains in northern Turkey that will definitely snow in the winter. So that's a fascinating one. And again, that's that interesting crossover between folklore and possible crypto creatures, so it's interesting. Yeah, so those are fun. I love the Yule Cat. Yule Cat is a favorite of mine. So, yeah.
Well, in real life, have you had any paranormal experiences?
It's interesting because my undergraduate was an old independent college. Grew up in California, and it was in Marin County, which is the county just north of San Francisco. And there was an old independent university there called Dominican College. It was actually connected. I'm not Catholic myself, but it was connected to the Dominican convent there. And the old music building was said to be extremely haunted by members of the Hearst family. The Hearsts were the great philanthropists of one of the great philanthropic families of the early 20th, late 19th and early 20th centuries, and at least a couple members of them, because they used to own the property and they used to have a house there. At least a couple of them were said to actually haunt the music department, which I was actually studying music there at the time, which is an old 3-story building with a big performance stage in the middle, but then practice rooms and things all around it. And people that were there late at night doing practice would very often hear things like footsteps in the hallways and such, and they'd open the doors and look in both directions and they'd see nothing. One afternoon when I was there, I definitely I was upstairs on the 3rd floor, and I was the only person there, and I definitely heard what sounded like some kind of knocking or footstepping type stuff, but there was no one there. So make of it what you will. It didn't really freak me out. I didn't get like the hairs standing up on my neck or anything, but it was just an interesting thing. Yeah, that was when I had a friend of mine actually lived in the building. He was the caretaker for the building and had his own room, which had a shower and stuff and whatever. He used to get all sorts of crazy stuff, rattling and shaking and footsteps and stuff. It didn't bother him at all. He was really funny. It was just like, yeah, whatever, Then he came into my room one night and I was like, well, you just go out. I can't deal with this right now. And apparently they did. So I just spoke to them like humans, and yeah, it was fine. So
They were nice ghosts.
I was hoping we were going to get like some singing ghosts or get some like Phantom of the Opera stuff going
Seriously. So yeah, I heard a few creaks and knocks and stuff that might have just been the building settling, but it was a little odd, definitely. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And I was going to ask you, you touched on a little bit earlier about Catholicism. The Pope is now opening portals.
Oh, I have no idea. Never heard of it. No.
Supposedly starting, actually, I think he's already started. He's opening 5 portals.
I've heard nothing about this.
Yeah, they've got the bricked up walls in front of all the saints.
Oh, okay.
So they're going to break the bricks down, and he's going to open it up and have some ceremony. And he's calling them portals now.
Yeah, is that a good idea? Who knows?
The Pope did not. And then I heard today that our president's going over there, and I'm like, oh Lord, this is getting to be a little weird.
Yeah. No, I've heard nothing about that. That's really interesting. I'll have to.
Okay. I think we need to revisit a discussion we had with a previous guest of they're not even hiding it anymore.
I agree. I listened to
why does our president need to be over there for the opening of said portals?
He's Biden is Roman Catholic. I do know that. So maybe he was invited just for that reason. So okay. That would make sense. So as a head of state,
he's not gonna know what's going on.
As a head of state, though, I mean, I can see that. So it's probably some sort of archaeological thing or whatever, and they're gonna that makes sense. Yeah. So when you first said opening portals, I was thinking something like the Cairn Collider in Switzerland, you know, and they were going to
Yeah, well, that's the way
Are we going to start Doctor Stranging it or something?
Exactly. Yeah, when I read the headline and they were calling portals, I'm like, what? The Pope's doing what?
Pope is now Doctor Strange, apparently, or whatever. So that's what I was thinking. I'm like, okay.
That was the first thing that I thought, too.
Well, that was where the headline
I was like, wait.
When I read it, I was like,
wait a minute.
Hey, do we really want to be doing that? No, we don't want to be doing that.
At least don't let the Pope do it. Don't let the Pope do it.
Yeah, it was.
Like
I don't want to know what's going to come out of there.
You get Clive Barker monsters. Don't do that, okay? You want Cthulhu? That's how you get Cthulhu, okay? Let's not do that.
If he opens the portal and a little box comes out, don't touch it.
Touch it.
No limit configurations, please. No Lovecraftian horrors.
If they do, keep them there.
Yeah.
I'm already concerned enough. We've got 27 years later coming out this year. We don't need
a rage virus from another dimension.
No.
Well, I saw another headline that said it was something to the extent of the first UFO was crashed after the original Wizard of Oz, and now we're having all these sightings of something, and they just came out with the newest version, a newer version of the Wizard of Oz. Is it coincidence?
No.
Well, I listened to a show about
it anymore, Glenn.
It's those damn monkeys.
Exactly.
You want flying monkeys? That's how we get them.
I listened to a podcast by Stephen Greer earlier, and he said, people don't realize what you see in movies, we already have. We can already do. Right. And I'm like, and I instantly went to the Marvel MCU, and I'm like, whoa. So,
if you have the Infinity Stones, hide them now.
Maybe I've read too many comic books.
Guilty.
Yeah, that's how I grew up. So
yeah, me too. Yeah.
Are you a Marvel or DC man?
I was both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I started with Marvel in the 80s, but then when DC started really ramping up their cool stuff in the mid 80s and on after John Byrne went over there and stuff, I became a DC guy as well. So, and then got into like all the like Watchmen and Sandman and all that kind of stuff too. So, yeah.
Okay, well, since we have broached the topic, have we seen the new Superman trailer?
Yeah, it's very good. I enjoyed it. I feel like I personally feel like James Gunn has really got the feel for how it should be. So, yeah.
Glenn.
Okay. No, I have not seen it. No, I have not seen it. So
I have some complaints, but
that's quite all right.
Good. I feel like DC is just on this rampage of they pick people that are good for one role but not the other. Like I really loved Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Good Bruce Wayne. For Batman. I liked his smartassery, so I appreciated that. And like we didn't really get to see Henry Cavill much as Clark Kent, but he was a really good Superman. Where I feel like this new guy, I feel like they tried to find as close to a Henry Cavill lookalike as they could find.
Right.
And they keep screwing up the costume. I felt like he made a presentable Clark Kent.
Yeah.
We finally have a good Lex Luthor.
He looks great. He looks really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, mwah.
Yeah.
But,
the young version.
No to Lois Lane. Now, we were watching it whenever I got into work yesterday, and everybody was just like, but we've got Crypto.
Yes. And that's all that matters is the dog.
Yeah, we were just like, that's all.
All right, Tim, before I let you go, I'll switch back to one thing. Do you believe in Bigfoot?
Yeah, I live up in the Pacific Northwest. It's kind of required. So yeah, I don't see why not. I've read a lot about the stories and stuff. In fact, I don't live that far from Mount St. Helens, which has one of the most famous Bigfoot stories of all. creatures attacking the cabin one night. So yeah, I'm only an hour or two drive away from it. So yeah, it's very much part of the lore up here. And a lot of people drive around with like Bigfoot stickers on their cars and hoodies and things with it. So yeah, he's very much part of the lore. So
well, I
do you have a favorite cryptid?
Love the Jersey Devil and the Dover Demon. It's another one I'm very fond of. I think a lot of these creatures in my Christmas book qualify as cryptids in their own way. So,
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Tim, tell everybody where they can find your stuff, because we want to make
sure. My website is just timrayborn.com, TIMRAYBORN.com. Very easy. It's got all my books and stuff and links to them. A lot of them are available. Like the Christmas lore book, you can find in Barnes and Noble. Just ask for it; they have it there. That's a great one. As is the new Valentine's Day book has just come out, and I'm going to be ramping up stuff for that in January and February. But those are my two of my most recent books. As I said, I also have a big comprehensive guide to Northern mythology and various other books on my website. Some fantasy novels that I've written, various other things. So I work with a lot of different publishers, and it's a lot of fun. So I really feel very blessed to be able to do what I do. It's great.
So clear your schedule for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I was just pulling up. We haven't started scheduling February. In the week of Valentine's Day, I have no one on that Wednesday at 9 or 10 o'clock if you're interested. So
yeah, I could definitely do that. Again, I'm on the West Coast, so I can't do too early in the morning your time. It needs to be, my time. So, but yeah, early February, you want to do something for Valentine's Day, happy to do it. That would be delightful. Love to do it.
Heck yeah. I'll have to make sure my ladies are all present for that show. So yeah. Well, they all work in public safety. Well, not all of them, but two of them work in public safety, and so they kind of got weird schedules. So getting them all together is.
Now, is Erin night shift or is she day shift? Is she night shift too?
She's 6P to 6A.
Okay.
So yeah. So
night shift girly too.
Yeah. I'm glad I don't do that anymore. If you care, Tim, I'm a retired firefighter paramedic. So.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah, that's really cool. That's great.
Yeah, or retarded. I'm not sure which. So
both. And he just drags you down into the trenches with him.
Yes, I got Cheyenne in it, so she's got me to blame for this.
But I have got official clearance to tell the coppers to F off whenever I'm trying to take a call. So
okay, I was hoping you say you get your first security clearance. I was going to say, man, that was quick. So
no, hold on. Before we hop off here, I do want to show you something on the side of cryptids. Hold on.
Oh, mercy. I'm afraid to look. And I did look. I asked my wife to look while we were on here if we had your book already, because I swear it looks familiar. And she says, look on the bookshelf behind you. I think that's where that one is. So I may already have yours and just haven't read it yet.
Oh, the Northern mythology book? Cool. Yeah. Well, happy to come on and talk about that anytime. Sure, I would love to.
Oh yeah, because I'm just learning that and I'm fascinated with it. So.
Okay, well, this is a very good introduction, if I do say so myself. It draws from a lot of scholarly sources, but makes it very easy reading. So it's meant for ages about 14 and up. It doesn't censor anything, and it kind of is like the uncensored versions of these crazy myths. But yeah, no, I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you do.
Okay, so, yeah, I'll let you know.
So I got my fancy little key card, right?
Oh, yes.
Boring. So I was like, okay. Here's what we're going to do.
Mothman? Yeah.
We're going to Mothman it.
Mothman it. Excellent. That's great.
I'll put you on a list. So. Tim, I've enjoyed having you. And we're definitely going to schedule. I'll let you know about what day in February we can get together and work it out, because that would be awesome. Yes. And I have a feeling we might have you back there for the Norse.
Sure.
And I had started a book and I can't remember, but they believe it's I don't know if it's a religion, but it's a way of life for an older culture, and they believe in Yeti. It's actually in their family chain. So
interesting.
I might bring you back on that. So yeah, because I'm the Bigfoot guy. So
that's great.
But Tim, have a Merry Christmas. Thank you for coming on. And really I enjoy it. And I hope everybody goes buys your book, and we will have you back soon.
Sounds great. I would love to. It sounds really fun. Really fun talking to you both.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks,
you. I really appreciate it. Merry Christmas.
Glad we were able to do it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I am too. All right. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, that was great. You got
Yes.
something on your face. That was really great. You know,
I
I
love
didn't
that
know
shit.
some of that stuff. I didn't know some of it. So yeah, that was really great.
Well, there was a lot of it that I didn't know about. I actually, something you might be interested in, there is an issue of Hellboy where Hellboy fights Krampus.
Ooh, I'll have to look for that one. Okay.
I'll have to have Travis send it to me because I got it for him for Christmas one year. Um, I
Okay.
don't
Ooh,
care for the Hellboy art, but it is an issue of Hellboy fighting Krampus.
I
Um,
like it. I
but
like it.
no, it's funny because a lot of that Christmas stuff I found from watching The Office. Dwight comes in the office dressed up as Belschnickel, and Belschnickel decides whether you have been impish or admirable. So if you have been admirable, you get a small gift. I guess would be similar to like you got your fruit or nuts, or in this case, Belschnickel was giving them little wooden bowls. And if you were admirable, or if you were impish, you got the shit smacked out of you with a bushel of brandy.
And I'm slowly learning a lot about the Norse. I had not heard of Yule Cat, so that's my reading for tonight. And I'm going to see if I have his book. Well, we can't say where we'll be. We'll be back after the first of the year. Let's see. I think our first scheduled show back is the 8th, January the 8th, which is Elvis's birthday. We should have somebody on that's an Elvis impersonator.
I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to find.
I'll get Brenda on that. She seems like the type that would be able to do that. So, all right, deal. So that we will be back then. Until then, everybody have a Merry Christmas. I hope Santa was good to you, and we will
Hopefully
see
you don't wind up with any lashes from Krampus.
That's
and
true.
you don't wind up in any snow globes on Krampus's shelf.
That's where I'm afraid you're going to put me. So
that's how you got to plead your case with him.
Yeah, well, all right. Everybody have a Merry Christmas. We
Merry
will
Christmas.
see you soon. We will have a New Year's Eve show, or New Year's Eve or New Year's Day show lined up for you here in the near future. So see you soon.
You're gonna want to be here for that.
Oh, yes, you are. If you liked our show with Vic, just go back and research it. You'll love this show. Everybody have a Merry Christmas. We'll see you soon. Bye. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Guys. This is a pre-recorded episode. Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope you're having a great day. We have some Christmas stuff lined up for you tonight. It's going to be great. I hope Santa was good to you. Let's see who we got hiding backstage here. I got the one and only beautiful Amanda. How are you this evening?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Santa skipped me, but hey, what do you think?
Oh, no.
Well, I was expecting that. I got a lump of coal, so.
Not the coal. I got that one year. It's up.
Yeah. Well, he could at least left beer or liquor, but oh well. I guess I should have put cookies out. So
you didn't leave the cookies. That was the problem.
That's it. Well, we have a great guest tonight. Doug has written a book about it's kind of a Christmas Carol with a firefighter's twist on it, because he is also a firefighter, and I'm not going to say paramedic because I forgot to ask him, but he is still working in Columbus. And let's talk about his book. Hello, Doug. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Hey,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's our pleasure.
Thanks
We're
for being
glad to.
here.
So tell us a little bit about your book and what inspired you to write the book.
All right. So my backstory is that I started fighting fire about 33 years ago as a volunteer. And then I moved into a paid job on Columbus Fire 25 years ago. And I've been there since. I am a paramedic and a firefighter, and now I'm also a lieutenant, and I'm in charge of a ladder company on the south end of Columbus, Ohio. So I'd always been kind of creative. In high school, I liked creative writing. When I graduated high school, I moved into the fire department, and I kind of put all that beside me. I just never really looked into it too much. And after doing, quite a few years in the fire service back in 2007, I had a pretty terrible call where a little boy died in a car wreck, and it was a pretty rough call for me, and I struggled quite a bit. And I had seen a lot of stuff in my career up to that point, but there was something about this one that just hit me wrong. Maybe it was just all the stuff I've seen just building on itself, but this run really affected me, and I knew while I was standing in the median of the freeway, the outer belt, I knew something had changed. There was something different in me. I just felt like the world had changed just now. I didn't know why. And I was struggling with it. And so we got done with the run. This little boy, we actually, because of the traffic and we were on the outskirts of town, we actually flew him to Children's on a helicopter on med flight. And he lived for another day, and then he ended up dying in the hospital. And I struggled quite a bit. I went back to the station. I finished my day, and then I went home. It was getting close to Christmas time. It was in late November, early December, and I struggled for a long time from this. Me and my wife started having some problems, and this was all my fault. This was because I wasn't willing to admit that there was something wrong. Every other bad run I'd ever had, I had gotten better. That's how I do things. I just feel better. At some point, I work myself through it. But this one, I was struggling to work through. And shortly after that, trying to find a way to work through it, I decided to start writing some books. And the first thing I did was I wrote a book about runs, just all the runs I've had. And I wrote this book, and it was called Slow Burn. And I was hoping to tell the story of PTSD and what it's like to be a firefighter. But what I quickly realized writing that book was that every firefighter in the world who wants to write a book about runs they've taken. And while it's super interesting to me to talk about my own runs, I didn't always feel like everybody else wants to sit and listen to my runs all the time. So I put that book away. The other thing that book did to me, which was kind of tough, was it brought, while I'm going through my issues, it brought every other issue to the surface, because now I'm writing graphically about every run I've been on. And so it actually had the opposite effect of what I had hoped. So at some point I was wise enough, I guess. I put that away, and I said, I really like this creative writing again. I'm going to write something far away from this. But in my head, I always wanted to tell a story about what I went through with that. So after a couple years of really struggling, I was able to get better. I used some of the department's resources, and me and my wife were able to get better. We just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary last month, or a month and a half ago. And so things got better for me. But in my head, I'd always wanted to tell this story and see if I could help somebody else. The biggest reason is I want to tell somebody else that if you're going through this, you have to recognize you're going through it to be able to get out of it. And so I wrote a few books. I got a publishing deal. I put, I think, 4 books out with a publisher. The publisher ended up going out of business, and they gave me my rights back to my books. So having the access to freelance editors and cover artists and all this stuff, I decided to just put books out myself. And so for a few years I was writing, and I wrote some fantasy novels. I wrote a series about werewolves being sold as pets, which I think is pretty interesting. It's called Tamed. And I try and put firefighters in a lot of my books. So Tamed is basically it's a female firefighter who gets attacked by one of these pets that goes rabid or whatever. And as she's trying to figure out why she's changing, the company that sells these can't let the world know or the government know. And so they send people out to eliminate her. And so that's the story. So it's a little horror, a little action, but it was one of my most popular books, actually. It did pretty well. And then I did a sequel to it, and there'll be a third one eventually. But I'm getting off topic a little bit. But in the course of all this writing, I always kept going back to what I set out to do in the first place. And one Christmas, probably in 2018, I had this idea: what if I wrote a story based on Scrooge, Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and instead of having the main character this greedy older man that nobody liked, and well, we all know the Scrooge story. I thought, what if I did a firefighter who has PTSD like I had? This firefighter, I was never on the verge of suicide, but this firefighter in my story's on the verge of suicide. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if he's visited by the three ghosts from A Christmas Carol, and he's shown parts of his life, and he's shown how he started his career excited and loving it and the adrenaline rush, and how he progressed to where he is now, and then what's going to happen in the future if he stays on this path. So that was my idea. And I was working on another book at the time, so I just kind of put it aside. And every once in a while I think about it, I think someday I got to write that. And then maybe a year or 2 years went by, and I sat down and thought, I've got nothing else going on my stories. I'll write that story. And I'll tell you what, I wrote it faster than any other story I've ever written. It just poured out of me. Like, it was just, I had the idea and it just poured out of me, like I said. And so I thought I had something. I really thought I had a good story here. And so I called my cousin, who's also a firefighter. He's an assistant chief now in another department. But we came up together through the fire service, and we've been pretty close. And he helped me through a lot of my issues. I've helped him through issues of his own. And so I took it to him, and I just said, "Hey, Greg, if you ever get a chance to read this, I'd love to know what you think of it." So he read it. He said he read it in one night, couldn't put it down. So he contacted me and said he wanted to come over. He didn't want to talk to me on the phone. He came over to my house and he said, "You've got something." He said, "I want to do anything I can to help this get out there because you've got something." And so that's when I kind of knew, hey, this might be as good as I hoped it was. So I proceeded to, because it's a novella like Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, it wouldn't do very well as a whole book because it just wasn't long enough. So I decided to write some more stories in the paranormal suspense categories and put them all together in one big collection and tie them all together with the fire department and stuff. So that's what I did. I sent it off to a freelance editor that I use, and usually she writes me back and tells me how much work my work needs. And then instead this time she said, you've really got something good here. And we worked on it. We cut it a little bit, and I was able to tell what I wanted to tell about that in an interesting way and a unique way by using Charles Dickens, his story that everybody knows. And once we put it out, I've gotten, if you look at Amazon reviews or whatever, it was real well received. It became my best-selling book, and it still is today. And I'm just real proud of it. If you can't tell by what I'm talking about, I'm super proud of it. And I feel like it has done what I set out to do back in 2008 when I started writing. And I'm just so excited that it's out. It's been out a couple years now, but I just love it when I hear from people, like hearing from you and wanting to talk about my book. I'd love to talk about it. Some of the guys at my firehouse get tired of me talking about my books, but But this one, I tell them all they have to read. So
it is a must read. Yeah, I agree. So were you a Dickens fan before this?
I was a Dickens fan, like everybody's a Dickens fan. Like I read Scrooge back in high school, and there's something else about this book that's amazing. When I started writing it, and I decided I better know more about Dickens if I'm actually using his template to tell a story. I don't want anybody to think I'm copying off Dickens. I want them to know that I'm inspired by Dickens. So I started looking into Charles Dickens, and the most amazing part of this story, and I talk about it in my foreword of the book, but Charles Dickens, towards the end of his life, was involved in a train or a carriage accident. I have to reread it. I forget, but he was involved in a pretty serious, I think it was a train accident.
I think
and
so.
Several people died there, and he helped people. Now, back then, they helped people by giving them brandy to calm them. But we know now it helps you bleed out more because of the blood thinning attributes of brandy. But after that call, he suffered from PTSD. Now, they never called it that back then, but he has all the signs and symptoms of PTSD. And he lived the rest of his life with severe PTSD. There was times that he would be on a stagecoach and curl up in a ball in the aisle and start screaming because he thought it was going to wreck. He would have terrible nightmares. It's just, and to me, that just hit home because that's what my book's about. And I didn't know that about Dickens when I came up with this idea for PTSD, but reading about it, I say at the end of my foreword that I think it's a book that Dickens himself would like. I think he would understand it. So yes, I was a fan of Dickens in the same way everyone else loved Scrooge. But it was just the idea that I just thought I've always thought was a great idea.
Yeah. I grew up, like everyone, I was forced to be a Dickens fan, but then I read multiple books by Dickens and started doing some research on him because I actually was fascinated with him. He was one of the authors that just kind of struck a chord with me, and I was like, man, he's got some great stuff. Sometimes a little long, but he's got some great stuff. So, back then they got paid a penny a word. So
is that what it was?
Yeah. So if he could stretch it out any longer, he would.
Yeah, for sure. I'd make a lot more money than without an editor. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Because I don't guess they had editors back then. I guess it was him and a typewriter. So, but yeah, I was always inspired by it. In one of our holiday traditions in the house is Christmas Eve, right at midnight, we sit and watch the 1938 Christmas Carol, the original Christmas Carol movie. It's just been one of my favorites all my life. So it's kind of like a little tradition. Even my kids, I think, now are doing it now that they've moved out and they're on their own. So
now, the animated one with Jim Carrey, I believe it is, came out a few years ago. That one's really close to his original story. I mean, yes. A lot of them go way off and just take aspects of it, but that one's really close to his original story. I enjoy it. I watch that about every couple of years. I enjoy it.
Yeah. I like the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Muppets? Yeah. My wife loves Muppets.
That's probably my favorite version of that movie.
I kind of wish somebody, he's too old now. And I just got a brain cramp. Oswald, Christmas Vacation. What's the guy's
Griswold. Chevy Chase.
Chevy Chase. I kind of wish he had done a comedy version of A Christmas Carol. So,
that would have been great.
Well, you do have Bill Murray's Scrooge.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like Bill Murray does a good job. I like him, but I don't know. I like Chevy Chase. I guess Christmas Vacation is never one to be top. So
yeah,
love it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the time of year where you tune in all these old movies that you love. So yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, here in Atlanta, we don't get snow, so we just have to watch it on TV. So
we get plenty up here in Ohio.
Oh yeah.
I would trade. So my wife on Sundays, she goes, "All right, is there a snow football game on? That's what I want to see." So.
We've already gotten quite a bit of snow here in Kentucky.
You do? You do get
Yeah.
one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had snow already a few times.
Okay.
It's been in
Nothing
the
sticks
60s
yet.
here in
Yeah.
Atlanta. So, yeah. It's been in the 60s.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the 60s. We may drop to the 40s.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's probably about that here right now. It's probably in the 40s or maybe even 30s. It's pretty chilly.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's when you were writing this I think I got it from you. You used a lot of you in this. You pulled a lot of yourself into it. And was it the process of writing it or the process of telling the story or telling others your story that made you start feeling better with the PTSD?
Yeah, so that's tough. This book does have a lot of me in it. I don't think I could have written this book when I was going through it. And I actually tell people, I've actually had people come up to me at book signings or sometimes I do conventions, and they've come up to me and they start telling me their story. And I can tell right away that they are going through something. And I don't recommend my book to them. I tell them that they probably shouldn't read it because it will dredge up stuff. Now, when you're through it or before you ever get into it, I do think that it's good because you can look back at it with a fresh and I don't really know the right word I'm looking for, but you can look at it in a way that it's not going to be harmful for you. So I've told people not to, but when I wrote this, I did put there is a car accident in this where a little girl dies. I changed a lot of the details, but that's my run. That's me, and so most of the runs in there are a conglomerate of different runs I've been on or lifted straight from a run if it worked for my story. So this is my story. I mean, it really is, minus the fact that, like I said, I wasn't suicidal at the time. But you asked how I got out of it. I think a few things helped me. One, I'd always had a good support system. I have a very caring wife. She's a nurse. I have family. I have a mother. I have my cousin. He was huge for me because he had gone through his own stuff, and we helped each other. My fire department was great. I had a great crew at the time, and I talked about it. I never shied away from telling the story, and sometimes I'd well up or I'd get pretty emotional talking about it, and that's probably part of the evidence that I was still in it, because I couldn't talk about it without it. So I talked about it a lot, but for me, I think something about the way my brain works, I have to be careful how I say this because everybody's so different and I don't want to minimize anybody else's suffering. But at some point I'm sleeping on the couch. Me and my wife are talking about maybe this isn't working out. My life is falling apart. I'm spending evenings while they're eating dinner. I'm sitting on the couch with the news on, just watching the news. I mean, I'm just not even. So for a while I was doing that, and at some point I looked at it and something in my head clicked, and I said, "What am I doing? Am I going to be happier with where this is going?" I'd already driven my wife far enough away that she was super supportive, but you can only take so much. And so one day, I don't know that I woke up and it was just there, but I just remember feeling better. Like I felt like it was time. I had grieved enough, and it's ruining my life, and maybe I can get better. And so I actually called upon which I was always against. Maybe it's macho. I don't know, but I was always against therapy. I was always against all that stuff. I always felt that nobody can understand me like I understand me. Mm-hmm. So how can they help me? And my wife would talk about when we were going through it, how about we go get therapy? No, I'm never doing that. So I realized that day or sometime around that time that maybe getting some help is my last option, but I feel better. But just because I feel better doesn't mean my wife's all of a sudden over the last 2-3 years of living with me. And it wasn't that I was mean or anything like that. I didn't start drinking. That's a big thing is if people are suffering, they got to be careful not to just get into drinking. I never did. a lot of this is luck. This isn't because I'm something different than anybody else. A lot of this is luck. I just didn't go that route, I guess. And so we went to, this is funny, we went to one therapy session and we sat down and the therapist asked me, okay, Doug, what do you want out of this? And I said, I feel better all of a sudden. I'm ready to work towards my marriage again. And I want to help my wife. Her name's Angie. I want to help Angie get better. And the therapist looked at Angie and said, what do you want? And for a minute, I was scared to death that she was going to say, I want out.
Half the pension. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. And so I waited, like I listened for a second. And she said, I want to get better too and help this marriage. And so
that's great.
She actually continued to go for a little while. And maybe I'm saying something that she doesn't want me to say, but she continued to go for a little while. And we started working together. And one of the biggest things that helped us work together was we realized somewhere during the course of our marriage, we stopped doing things together. It became, hey, let's paint the bathroom. Okay, Angie, you go pick out the paint. And while you're at work, I'll paint it. Groceries. And just go get the groceries. I don't want to go. And so after that, we started to make ourselves do things that maybe we don't want to do just to be doing it together. So we would paint the bathroom together. We would go get groceries together, which my wife takes forever to get groceries. And I hated it, but I did this, right? And so these are the things I did and she did. And we were able to work through it. And our marriage is stronger now than it's ever been. Now, maybe if she's sitting here next to me and you ask her that, she'd say, well, but I don't know. But as far as I know, it is. So
yeah, it's you don't sound like you had that one aha moment where suddenly you realize you have PTSD. It sounds like I don't want to say you slipped into it, but you recognized it from a distance and then said that here it is. With me, of course, I told you previous about the story. It was the orthopedic surgeon when he told me I was never going back. It wasn't a bad call that took me out. I've seen plenty of bad calls. I've had calls that I thought about, that I've dreamt about, but I always put it in a little drawer and tucked it away nice and neat. And at that moment, he told me, you're never going to be a firefighter paramedic again. All of those calls just hit me in the nuts. They just all suddenly came back to me and I was overwhelmed. And I'm surprised they didn't put me in a mental institution at that moment, because basically all I could do is cry.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it's just, your career, you'll find something else. I'm 50, what was that, 52 at the time, something like that. You're not going to find something else. Welcome to Walmart. What the hell's that? But, so but it was, like you said, it wasn't just the one call or one thing. It was cumulative, and we put them in little drawers and keep them nice and neat and tucked away. And then one day you can't. And mine was an aha moment. And I was not lucky to have a department that supported me. They were all like, PTSD is a bunch of crap. That's, they were the old guys, and that's okay. They don't get it. They will.
Yeah.
One day, I think it comes back and haunts all of us one day in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like your story with the 3 different ghosts. I think it really does in different ways, because I have a paramedic friend of mine. He's like, oh, I wouldn't have got into this job if I couldn't handle it. And I've done it for 30 years and I'm retired. One day it's going to hit him, whether it's he's out shopping and he hears the sound or whatever, it'll hit him. And you got to learn how to deal with it.
Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night thinking you hear the tones?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. I hear the tones at my house.
Yep. There's like a thump sound before the tones. And when you go into Walmart or Kmart or wherever, and when the air compressor hits in and the vents cause that little suction on the drop ceiling, the styrofoam drop ceiling. It's not styrofoam, but the foam ceiling, and it kind of like a thump, and I'll jump.
It's always going to be in you.
But now I'm kind of glad I got away from it. It started right as I was going out. Now they do the computer, the AI voice, engine, ladder, truck.
Oh my
so,
gosh.
so it's different now, but yeah. And you'd hear and that was the other thing. You could tell if the dispatcher was excited, something was going on. You know?
You could tell.
Yeah. Truck 42, be en route to, and if you hear him, truck 42, I need you to go to. There's always a different tone of their voice. So, and I'm sure you experience it. If it comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning, if it's medical or if it's fire, it's bad.
Yeah.
I don't know what the mojo is at 3 a.m. But if the tones go off and you roll over and look and saying it's 3 a.m., you're like, going to be working.
That's for sure. Anytime there's like that sweet spot between 2 and maybe 5, you get a report of a fire, multiple calls, you know this could be the work. You're going to work. So yeah, that's for sure.
You gotta earn that money. But I still love it. And I would, if I could figure out a way to do something, sneak my way back in, I would. But like I told you earlier, my wife says you're too old, give it up. So,
well, my knees tell me every once in a while I'm too old, but I just tell them to be quiet for a little bit longer. I got 8 more years.
Yeah, it's funny. Every time I go to the doctor with a new pain, she goes, that's one of the occupational hazards of firefighters. What?
And sometimes I feel like I laid carpet my whole life, like with my knee, hitting that.
Yep. Yeah, I went in. I had a pain. It was in my left leg. It was like on the top of the left leg, and I couldn't get it to go away. So it was a pinched nerve. And so she goes through and she's telling me the exercises and things to do. I'm like, yeah, great, whatever. Lose weight, And right before she was done, she goes, this is a thing that happens a lot to cops and firemen. I'm like, what? She goes, that nerve, because you all have the air pack sitting on your back, has been pressed down for so long, you'll twist or whatever one night in your sleep, and it's going to go back to where it's always pinched. And she's like, so it's going to be like years and you'll never feel the left side of your leg again. And I was like, nah, whatever. She was right.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez.
There's a lot of stuff that we're going to have with our body. My shoulder's kind of rough. My shoulder's a little rough, but
yeah, they put me on CPAP because of the hours.
There you go.
But like I said, I still love it to this day.
Yeah.
Now you say you have a son. How old was he when you were going through all of that?
So he was born in 2004. So he would have been 4.
Wow.
So this happened in late 2007 was the run. So I'd say from 2008. So he would have been getting ready to turn 4 until he was probably 7 years old. And hey, I think sometimes I might make it sound like this was just a miserable existence. But I mean, we're still living life. I mean, we still went on vacations. I just might be more like quicker to snap at him, yell at him or something. So it's not like I wasn't there. I just mentally wasn't always there. So he, for probably about 3 years, I would say he probably didn't see the best of me. I'm happy to say I was never violent, nothing like that. I didn't even, I didn't verbally abuse him. It just wasn't being there as a dad as I should be. But that wasn't all the time. Let's say a month I have 10 really bad days and a few not great days, but it wasn't every single moment.
Right.
That makes sense.
It hits you at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you disengage and re-engage. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I really want anybody listening to this that's in the fire service, just to know that the best thing to do is be aware of how you're feeling, and it's fine to talk to people. I mean, old guys, back when I started, the old guys didn't want to talk about this stuff, but it's getting more accepted in different fire services. Columbus Fire is big on it. We've actually opened a wellness center of our own that we can send. If one of my guys have a bad run, and I can see it's affecting them, because I know what to look for. I know that, oh, he's acting like me or whatever. I can pull them from the shift. I can pull them off duty and send them to this wellness center, and they can start helping them right now. So Krampus is really progressive with that. Before I put my book out, I sent it to our EAP, our Employee Assistance Program counselor, or head of that, and had her read it first, so that I was very careful that I didn't do anything in this that can make somebody worse. Because if she would have told me that this might make people worse, I would have been done. I wouldn't have put it out because that's not what I wanted. So she read it. She really liked it. She said her words were that this was going to help a lot of people. And then I let the chief of the fire department read it, and he actually wrote a quote for it and put in there. And they supported me greatly. The truck on the front of the cover, you can kind of probably see my cover behind me. The truck there is my ladder truck. My chief gave me permission to have the photographer come take a picture of me. That's me on the front, but they've photoshopped a different face, so it's not me. But I'm the model. So I'm the model. but
Nice.
That's my fire truck. So I'm real proud of that. That's the truck I ride every day, and I go to work. But yeah, so that was, their support was a big deal to me. And that's part of the reason I've had so much success with this book. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, I hope it goes on to help many people. I hope, they can use that in therapy and everything, and let people read this story, to help others. That's amazing.
I actually received, I'm bragging, right? So I just from Illinois, there's a lot of fire chiefs that put together a anti-PTSD group, and all these fire chiefs from these different departments put this together, and they contacted me out of the blue, and they presented me with a honorary. It's called the Yellow Rose. And that's their group. And they presented me with an honorary. They gave me a challenge coin, a real nice certificate. And they said for what they felt this book could do to help PTSD. So I was very honored to get that from them out of the blue. I never even heard of the Yellow Rose organization. But once they contacted me, that was special. That was pretty special to me. So.
Oh, yes. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Absolutely. And I was going to tell you, when I first got the book, I read I think it's in the foreword where you tell people not to read it if you're going through it. Yeah. And I had to stop and go back to it at a later time. So
I'm glad you did that.
Yeah. Oh no, it made a difference, but yeah, because it could have triggered me, which at the time I didn't know what triggered me. So yeah. They did therapy with me where they had me like listen to the online scanner, of your department and stuff like that to kind of get you back and in talking to them. But I lucked out. The counselor that I got had worked with firefighters before, so she knew we were nuts.
Yeah.
So, and you were talking about departments. It reminded me, we had a lady on the show. She's a psychiatrist. And she worked for FDNY right after 9/11.
Oh my gosh.
And FDNY after 9/11 and took a station, an old station that they weren't using. They made it another station, looked exactly like a station, didn't have apparatus in it. And that was her office. And it was with multiple other, psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors and things. And if like you felt like, hey, my guys need to talk, ladder 42, we're going to go to, they have a name for it, like Station Z or something. Okay. Dispatcher knows, take them out of service. They go there, they have coffee, they come down, they talk, they have donuts, whatever. And then the professionals make a determination of, okay, maybe we need to talk more. But yeah, they could back the apparatus in and everything. It's the coolest thing.
Wow.
Yeah, FDNY is really supportive. They've recognized obviously they had one of the largest event in the country for firefighter injury and loss of life. So yeah, they recognized pretty quick they had to do something. But I think that was a great idea, taking a whole station.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and she's like, we even had the pole, but they wouldn't let us slide it down.
I was going to say more therapists should offer donuts. Like,
Yeah,
that would be great.
We'll eat some donuts.
I would be more willing to go see a therapist if I knew there were donuts.
We have a slushy machine at our place.
You have what, Doug?
A slushy machine at our
Oh,
place.
nice.
So you can go down.
Oh.
We'll say that. We'll say, hey, do you need to go down and get a slushy? So,
Yeah.
Jealous.
Making light of
Yeah,
stuff.
I do.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm jealous. Yeah, we was in our station. They didn't give us nothing. So they're like, here's a free Keurig.
Oh gosh.
So the book, just so people know, the main story is that, but there's other stories in there, and they're not near as deep. They're not as emotional and about PTSD as that. They are, they are paranormal. One's about a serial killer, so they are in that vein, but they all tie together. You'll see some of the characters from the main story pop up here and there in the other ones, and so I just want to let people know, because I have had people who have purchased this book and then they later contact me and said, I didn't know it was 6 stories or whatever. I thought it was just this whole thing. So I just want to make sure I let people know that this is the first one. This is the novella, and then there's a few other stories in there. I like all the stories, but this is the one this is the reason I wrote the whole thing. So,
well, you like writing about the paranormal too, so
yes. So
I hadn't heard about the werewolf. So yeah,
werewolf.
Yeah, that would make a great movie.
I would love it to be a movie.
Yes.
And that's, if you look at the reviews or whatever, that's the biggest comment people say. They say, we got to see this as a movie, because it's just, some of the comments I get is that it's not like, I didn't want to do the same thing as every werewolf story. If you go look at werewolf movies or books or whatever, it's basically the same thing. They're all the same thing. It's bad werewolves terrorizing a town or whatever. And so I thought, wouldn't it be, and the way I came up with this is I had a Doberman Pinscher, a 110-pound big Doberman Pinscher, and I wanted to write a werewolf story. I was trying to come up with something unique, and I'm sitting there petting him, and he's panting, and I look at his teeth, and I thought, and this dog could really do some damage to me if he wasn't so tamed. And I thought, well, Mike Tyson owned a tiger. I mean, people own tigers in Texas. Would somebody own a werewolf if I could somehow convince them that it's not a person turning into a werewolf? If this company just convinces them that it's just a bigger dog that they found in the rainforest, and they bred them and they're selling them as big, lovable, gentle pets that are 6'7" on their hind legs. And in my head, my first vision of that was like just a lady walking in the park with this huge, like petite little lady walking in the park with a leash, and a massive werewolf just walking behind her, and her turning around and scolding it, and it put its ear back and like that. That was the thought I had. So that's where the idea came. So I do think it would be an incredible movie, but getting to that point is very difficult.
I think Sandra Bullock should be in it.
All right. Call her.
Like, I've already got thoughts.
Yeah.
I'll have to read that one. That one sounds great. I like
Yes.
I like that type of thing. And you're right, they do tell the vampires the same way every time, it seems like.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, werewolves.
Yeah.
I have vampires on my head because I was going to ask if you ever had done anything with
vampires
them.
too. They're always trying to find different ways to do these things, and it always turns out the same.
Yeah, I made my werewolves allergic to silver. So, I mean, they've talked about that a little bit, but yeah, so they don't get shot with a silver bullet and they die from that. They die from anaphylaxis. So as a paramedic, I know what anaphylaxis is, so I can have my werewolf not just die, he starts foaming at the mouth, his throat swelling up, the whole anaphylaxis. So that's the lore I gave them, is that they are allergic to silver. So I think in all fairness, I think other werewolf stories, they've called in an allergy before. So I'm not super unique in that, but So it's a fun book. It's a series. I put 2 out now. One's Tamed, and then the second one's called Untamed. And it's part of the Where Pets Unleashed series, is what I call it. So
Nice.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. Any other paranormal?
not really, not really paranormal. I write about what I'm inspired by at the time. So I wrote some fantasy stuff. I did a dystopian fantasy novel. I did a serial killer novel. But my paranormal stuff is mainly this story. Now, I have an idea for a second Firefighter book, short story along this lines, and I've been toying around with doing another paranormal story. Speaking of paranormal, like the final story in this book is about and I got inspired from a run I went on where the police called our ladder truck to be up on the overpass overlooking a river, and on the bank of the river, a body had washed up. So they couldn't see, they didn't have the right lighting down there. So they called us, and we put up our big scene lights so that they could process the scene. And sitting there on the side of the freeway, bored, watching this, I came up with this idea. And the idea is, what if they put this body in the back of the whatever they came, the wagon or whatever, and the person sat up and talked to the person sitting next to him, but only she could see it. So that story is about a same scenario, but when they put them in the back, a paramedic actually came on this one, but when the paramedic gets in the back, this body sits up and starts talking to this paramedic and needs her to do him a favor. And so, and then it goes from there, but it's supernatural. It's a paranormal. It's about basically the ghost of this person who died before they meant to die. And they have something that's crucial that they hide or cover up. Nice. So this person's trying to enlist the paramedic to go do this, who of course she thinks she's crazy. And so that's the other paranormal story in that book. There's a few. I got another one with ghosts. And I have another one with ghosts. Like it's called Death Alarm. It's in this book, and it's about a fire department. It's always, for me, it's always 22s. That's where I'm assigned. So most of the time, my books, the characters in there come from station 22. So it's always 22s. But they keep going on this fire alarm at this person's house, and it's the basement fire alarm. And this real sketchy guy is answering the door. And every time they go down there, they reset the fire alarm, and nothing's going on. And the third or fourth time they go there, they start to see a little bit stranger stuff. And basically there's a ghost in this basement that keeps setting off the smoke detector to try and get some help. So, and then I won't, spoil the book, but that's another paranormal story I have in there. So,
oh gosh, I'm going to have to get this and read it.
It's a great time of year to do it. Yeah. I like that one. That story was good. So,
man.
Yeah,
fun time.
It's like you were saying earlier, it's hard to find time to read.
Yeah,
we're all used to having something in front of our face now, or the news, like you said, 24/7, 365. So,
well, all my books are on audiobook, so this is also an audiobook, so people can listen while they're driving, mowing the grass, whatever. So,
do you do the voice?
No, I hire out. I hire freelance, and
yeah.
So yeah, it's read by a guy who did a pretty good job on this one. So, but it was funny. I will say this: he didn't, not being in the medical field, he struggled with the word carotid for carotid artery.
Oh
so
yeah,
he calls it carotid. So when you're reading, when you're listening to that, if you're in the medical field, that will make you go, what just happened?
Yeah, I interviewed an author. She wrote a book about basically she worked for a computer company like Google in the book, and one of her coworkers ended up being a terrorist that was going to set off this big computer virus and bomb and stuff. And she had, in the end of it, they had big explosion, people were injured. And I read the book beforehand, and there was a couple things she did wrong with the firefighters and the paramedics. So I mentioned it to her offline. I said, hey, if you ever write another one and you want some help, because these are things that stuck out at me. And she has now contacted me for her second book. And she's like, okay, you're in the back of the ambulance. Tell me about this, and this. And she's like, now I'm going to give you credit for this. And then I've had she's referred two other authors to me. So it's like, I'm like technically advising how to write things out. So.
Are they putting your name in the book?
Supposedly, I don't know. We'll see. So I don't think it's going to be published till like 26, but because they have to go through the whole editorial process and everything. So
I did have somebody contact me fairly early in my career. Like I said, my first 4 books were published, so they were out there a little bit more than me putting them out myself. But I had somebody contact me. I think they were from California, and they asked me if I'd read their work. I typically don't want to do that because there's nothing good that can. I mean, who am I? And now I tell you something that maybe is a little critical, no matter how nice I say it. You're going to just be mad. And so I just don't want to do that. Plus, I don't really have time to just read a lot of books. But I thought, this guy took the time to write me, so I'm going to read what he wrote. And he was writing about a fire department. And I started reading, and unfortunately, it was all the tropes that you see. Like, I think one of the runs had them getting a cat out of a tree, or something like that.
Yep.
It was all the tropes and the way they talked to each other. It was kind of like, "Hey, hero, come over here," and it was things like that. And my only thing I said to him, I said, you've got a really good style. I love your writing ability. I said, but what I would recommend is that you go to the closest fire department with you. Tell them you're writing a book and ask them if they'll let you just sit in there for the day. Maybe even take a run with them. Some fire departments allow you to do that. And I said, and just listen to how they talk to each other, their banter, and how they joke with each other, and maybe do that a little bit. And I never heard back from him. I hope I didn't upset him, but maybe I did. But it was hard to not be honest about it. And I said at that point, I said, I really probably am not. I'm not Stephen King. Let Stephen King tell people, hey, you're not doing a very good job with this, or whatever. So
somebody at some point probably told him he had to do something different. So
yeah, maybe. So
yeah, well, you're right, and there is no subject off limits at the fire station, and it's the funniest thing. You could go in there and talk about anything. I mean, literally anything, and it stays there, even if you disagree.
Yes.
'Cause 5 minutes later, you're on a run. So.
Well, how do you argue with 10 experts in everything?
Exactly.
Because when you talk to the guys on my shift, they know what they're saying, and it is true.
Yes. And they're all younger now. So they look
younger,
at you like, maybe back in your day you did it that way.
I hear that. Yeah, definitely. I am. Like I said, I'm 51 years old, and my whole crew, for the most part, are just turning 30. And sometimes I'm like, what am I doing here? I feel like dad. I mean, I feel like I'm going to say something and remind myself of my dad. I'm like, okay, because sometimes as a lieutenant there, I do have to squash some of the conversations that get a little out of hand. And that's just not, okay, everybody, let's stop. This is getting out of hand. We don't want to offend anybody. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, there are those too. So we've had the chief have to come down. So,
but don't they say you can solve every world problem at the firehouse table?
Yep.
We solve every world problem every morning, just nobody's listening to us.
Yep. That's the biggest thing I miss, aside for the rides to the scene, is sitting around that table.
Yes.
There's something magical about sitting around the table with a bunch of your guys that you can trust your life with. And, I don't know, I can't put it into words, but that's like, if I could have any parts of it back, riding the truck, getting the scenes, it's kind of cool. That was one of the things I used to joke about, especially to my cop buddies. You can have the best car in the world. You can have a Lamborghini. We're in Miami. That fire truck's coming down the street with the lights and sirens going. All the chicks are going to stop and look at the fire truck. They ain't going to give two rats' asses about your Lamborghini.
So I have a joke for my police officer friends, and I tell them every chance I see them. What do police officers and firefighters have in common? They both want to be firefighters. That's every cop I see.
Nice.
Yep. One of my son's friends, he applied for here in Gwinnett, both the police and fire department. And the police department called first because they needed bodies worse at that time than the fire department. And so every time I see him, and he's like one of my kids, I'm like, yeah, man, you were one civil service test away from being a real hero.
If he just spelled his name right, he would have
That's
been
right.
fireman, right?
That's right. Yeah. Where was I? I was in Tennessee here recently, and I had an interaction with some police officers. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. You're the true first responders. And they were like, get out of here. Just go.
Yeah,
You're a fireman.
That's great. It's great. I mean, we love the police. They come in sometimes and have pizza with us on pizza night. We have family in for pizza night. I mean, you're right. That's what I'll miss the most is the crew. I mean, just all my friends. So
yeah, your kids. Yeah. Because you're right. They become your kids, your brothers, your sisters, your kids. Yeah, exactly. Well, right now, one of the topics that's so popular is all these drones. Any ideas about paranormal drone stories?
Well, I mean, you have the Air Force saying, Air Force pilots saying they're seeing things that they can't explain. It's some crazy stuff. And it seems like, they used to always say, well, if there were aliens, everybody has phones. Why aren't we seeing them? Well, now we're kind of seeing things. And it's like, is it an alien? So who knows what it is? I tend to think that the government probably works on secret things that they don't want us to know they're working on. And sometimes we might catch that, but who's to say what it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think they are? All these drones, especially in New Jersey right now, all that stuff.
Oh, well, they're in Atlanta. I was just in Tennessee at my mom's, and they're in Tennessee too. They're popping up everywhere.
Wow.
And actually, I heard Patterson Wright Air Force Base. That's out by you.
Yes, I think I heard something about there.
They closed the airspace down. There's a air traffic control recording where the guy is like, we're sending a special team up to sterilize the air. And I'm listening to it going, what the hell does sterilize the air mean?
Yeah, but the government says everything's fine, so what could be wrong?
Nothing to see here. I think they're still looking for the intelligent life.
Is that what it is? They haven't found it?
They started up there and they're kind of migrating down. They're like, it ain't getting any better the further south we go.
Take us to your leader, and you're like, are you sure you want us to do that?
Well, he's already asleep. It's 4:00. So, but we only have a few more days till hopefully everything will return to somewhat normal. So, well, so you said that you have another one, third edition coming out to Tamed. Any other?
Still got to write it.
Okay. All right. Well, so I guess that's what I'm getting at. Do you have any in the typewriter or keyboard now that you're kind of piddling with?
I always have 3 or 4. And it's when I kind of play with one and maybe I lose a little inspiration, play with another, and then one of them will grab me for whatever reason. And then I'll start writing. So I have a kind of a time travel story that I really like, where our main character actually in one part of it goes back to the Great Chicago Fire on the day of the fire, but has no idea. And so I basically, it's kind of neat because the newspaper he sees, I went and in my research, I went and looked at the exact newspaper that came out that day. And so in my description, it's that. So I have a time travel story I'm working on. I have, like I said, another firefighter one that has to do with how fast your career goes. It's called It's a Fast Ride. So it's about a guy who joins the fire department and then retiring. And I think it's an interesting take on that. I think it's pretty cool. So I'll write that. And then the third in my werewolf series, I've got that I'm writing. So those are the 3 that are on my radar right now. I'm playing with, and one of them will really grab a hold, and I'll just start working on that. And it usually takes me about 2 years to put out a book. So probably the time travel one is the furthest along, and I'm really liking how it's turning out. So I'll probably work on that one next, but who knows?
Yeah, 2 years. That's quite a bit of time to do it. So,
and that's from conception to actually where it's on Amazon. I give myself about 6 months before it comes out just for promoting and going on. these shows with like people like you and stuff, and I usually spend about 6 months doing that before it comes out. So that's tied into it. Probably takes me about a year to write it, maybe get it edited. The editing process is, if you have a good editor, which I have the best editor ever, because every time she gets my book the first time, my wife hates it, because when she sends it back to me, I go out and say, she hates me. This editor hates me. She hates me. She hates my book. I'm done. I'm never writing again. I'm done. And my wife always says, okay, take a day to sit on it. And then I'll take a few days, and then I'll dig into it and start taking it one note by note. And then I'll be like, I hate her that she's right. Each one of these notes, she's right. And then by the time she's done just beating me down over the course of a few months of rewrites and stuff like that, I end up having something that's so much better than what I came up with. So I have to give her all the props. But yeah, so the editing process takes a while. So the whole process, probably once I actually buckle down and start working on it, is about 2 years, because I'm doing everything myself. I'm hiring a cover artist and collaborating with them. I'm hiring this editor who I've been using a lot lately, and then I'm putting it out myself. I'm converting it into paperbacks or hardbacks or whatever I'm doing. I'm hiring the audio book person. So I'm doing all of that, and it's a lot of work. And so yeah, like I said, probably 2 years is probably, if you told me right now, write a book today, when can it be out? It's probably gonna be 2 years.
Well, Amanda, how many times have we heard that authors would say their editors, they hate me?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
It's not an uncommon thing. We've had several authors on there like, I don't know why I do this. Every time I send something off, let's get it back and rewrite the whole thing. What the hell am I doing? So yeah,
in my dystopian fantasy, which is probably, so I have favorites like kids. You like all your kids for different reasons. My Christmas Carol is special for everything we talked about. My werewolf story is special just because I think that's a super unique idea. But my favorite book to, like, if I was going to listen to my own book or read my own book, it would be my dystopian fantasy. And there was a character in there that she said, we need to get rid of this character completely. And I'm like, this character's in the whole book. Like, this character does important things. And she's like, yeah, but here's why. And she's telling me why. Of course, I'm not, puff up my chest why I'm not getting rid of this character that I spent all this time creating. And then she would tell me, and we go back and forth. And she convinced me that maybe we should get rid of this character. And I did. And I mean, it's not a whole rewrite, but every time that character was in there, if that character did something important, somebody else had to do that important thing. So that was difficult, but yes, editors they're the best thing that can happen to you. And while you're working on it, and she doesn't take anything personally. I'll write her back. I'll be like, why do you hate every time I write anything, you hate it? And she'll say, just very calm, it's not that, Doug. My job is to make your book the best it can be. And I can't worry about if it hurts your feelings or something like that, something similar. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, I told you we'd only keep you for about an hour, so I want to stick with that. But tell everybody where they can get your stuff, because I'm excited about it. I love your work, and so yeah, you've got great stuff.
Oh, I appreciate it, and I'm so happy that you contacted me. I had a great time here. I'm an author, so I can be verbose, and I'm sure I talked the majority of this, but I hope it wasn't too boring for your listeners. But so my books, you can get them pretty much anywhere. If you listen Audible or iTunes, you can listen to the audiobooks. I have their paperbacks, Kindle versions. This actual book that we're talking about the most today is in hardback also. You can get them at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, just anywhere you can buy books. I think you can order them on a Walmart or Target's website. So anywhere you buy books, you can get my books. Sometimes they're a little difficult to find just because I am not a superstar author. This is my side job. But if you put my name in with Tamed, something I didn't take into account when I wrote Tamed, and that was the name, and then I put it into Amazon, I see that almost every erotic book ever written is named Tamed. So or untamed, or so that was an issue. So to find my book tamed, you have to kind of probably put in tamed Doug, Douglas, whatever. But using my name with my books would probably Firefighter Christmas Carol. If you type that in, it's going to come right up. It's popular enough, and it's unique enough of a name that it comes up. So, but yeah, you can get my books anywhere. So anybody who wants to check it out, and my email's in there. I welcome any kind of emails from anybody. I love hearing from people. So it's in the book, probably on the back cover. And but this was great. I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas. And I'm so thankful for you having me on here. And
hey, when you get your other books out, I want you to come back. I want to be on the podcast tour. So, and before you go, I want to tell you, you said tamed. I'm a Bigfoot person, and I look for people that research and do things on Bigfoot. And I found this lady, and she was an author, and she's knows everything there is to know about Bigfoot. And I'm like, I got to get her on the show. And I got her on the show, and one of my other co-hosts was on with me that night. And she does the research and knows everything about the cryptids, but then she writes paranormal erotica. Okay. And about 2 minutes into the interview, I was like, uh-oh. I'm a little lost here. Yeah. Luckily, my co-host did a great job. You weren't there, I don't think, that night, Amanda.
I was not, no.
I know Cheyenne was, because Cheyenne picked up right away. I was lost, and she just took off with it. So, but I was like, oh. So, yeah. You got to, yeah. And apparently she's very good at it, because she's a very popular author. So.
Okay, awesome.
Who knew?
Who knew?
Doug, have a great night. A Merry Christmas. I hope to hear from you soon, and I want to get you back when you do the other books.
Sounds awesome. Thanks, guys. I had a great time. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Doug.
All
Thanks
right.
a lot. Appreciate it. Have a good night. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yes, he's fantastic. I've already added his book to my cart on Amazon.
Mine is so full. All right. Well, everybody, we appreciate you taking your Christmas night and tuning into us. Yes, we are pre-recorded, but we are with our families doing something fun that we love. And I don't know, maybe we'll come back after the first of the year and tell you what Santa really did for us. So
probably still that lump of coal.
That's it. I'm still working on a New Year's Eve show, our New Year's show. So maybe we'll have some more details then. Everybody have a Merry Christmas. We will see you soon.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. I gotta find the button to push.
He's got the button.
Button. Where's the button?
What's up, everybody? This is Bobby Dizzle with a Caffeinated Cryptid. I wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and to remind you to send all complaints to bobbydizzle.com. Like, comment, and subscribe, and roll dang tide.
Hey guys, it is Harley from the Asylum with Harley and Joker and the Mod Squad Network, wishing you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from our family to yours.
Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you next year.
Hi everyone, your favorite misfit stopping by to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Hope that you all get that much needed time away from work or school or whatever you're doing to be able to spend this very important time of year with your friends, your family, or having that little bit of you time that you need just to, you know, sit back, relax, enjoy the good food, the good Christmas music, the good Christmas movies. Do whatever you got to do for the holidays, baby. But, you know, of course, I know that you all have been incredibly good this year and not on the naughty list like some of us. You know, it's only like the 28th year in a row, but you know, who's counting? But as we tell you every week, we are so blessed and thankful for all the support that you all have shown us all year and you show us every week. We can't even begin to tell you how much we appreciate everything that you all do. And we hope, everybody here at the Misfits, we hope that you have a very safe and a very happy holiday season. And we can't wait to see you in the new year. Mwah. Love you guys.
Hello, everybody. This is Brenda and Andy. And for everybody out there that watches the Sports Cat, Paranormal, and Misfit shows, we just wanted to say to y'all, Merry Christmas. Have a safe and happy holiday season.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Andy.